Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Representative Flook, and I'm here with my friend and Democratic colleague, Representative Jason Kander. We're both of the western side of the city, the state, representing Kansas City and large parts of other areas. As you know, with virtually every year I've been in the Missouri legislature, there's always been a question about ethics and conduct in campaigns. Every year that I've watched politics as a young man from college all the way until the time that I was elected, I've seen the issue come up over and over again. Unfortunately, it's always brought up in the context of partisan efforts to make someone look bad. And the unfortunate part of that is that it creates a lot of distrust among the public for the efforts of their elected officials. And the fact of the matter is, I can tell you from my experience in my time in the legislature and in my time as a citizen dealing with both Republican and Democrat elected officials, it's been my personal experience that most of the people you deal with are very honest and work very hard to follow the rules. And they are ethical people. But there is a few that will at times bend the rules, or there might be conduct that looks like that looks bad, even though it doesn't necessarily violate the rules. And those things cast doubt in the public on our efforts down here. And in this last summer, Representative Jason Kander approached me and asked if I'd be interested in working with him on developing a bipartisan piece of legislation to address some of the issues in ethics that have arisen in the last 2 or 3 years. And I told him I'd be happy to do it, primarily because, like myself, Representative Kander believes that most people down here are very ethical, and that if we work together, we can isolate potential loopholes, we can prevent conduct before it happens, and we can instill some trust in what we're trying to do down here in Jefferson City, and do so in a way that's not about campaign or poking somebody in the eye or trying to create an illusion of an ethical violation when there hasn't been one. But with real direct legislation that actually changes policy for the better. So Jason and I, or I'll say Representative Kander, I keep wanting to call him on a first name basis because I consider him a friend. Representative Kander and I began outlining some things that we think we could get both sides of the aisle to agree upon, and to present those in a bipartisan form. I've met with Speaker Ron Richard about these efforts, and he supports this effort, and I know Representative Kander has talked to Minority Leader Paul Lavoda, and he's supporting this effort. There will be other bills proposed, which will have different ideas in addition to those we're laying out, and we're certainly interested in those ideas, and would probably add them to the bill. If they're good for everybody. But I think the main purpose today is that we start the ball rolling with legislation that's bipartisan. And we let the Missouri public know that the best policy comes from people working together. And the best policies, creating the best laws, result in fairness and aren't about campaign politics. So with that being said, I'm going to let Representative Kander outline specifics of our proposed legislation.
Well, it's a pleasure to work with Representative Flook. He's one of the most respected members of this body on either side of the aisle. And for good reason. He works hard, but he's very serious about the job. Just a few minutes ago, most of you were in this room for another press conference with Representative Flook. He's an high demand because he does a good job down here. So it's not an item involved in this issue. And it's fitting that this be a bipartisan press conference because we're trying to create a solution, a bipartisan solution to what is, as Representative Flook mentioned, a bipartisan problem. It's a problem in the Missouri system, in Missouri's laws. This is not an attempt to point fingers at anyone in particular. I'm going to run through for you some of the major provisions of the bill, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. What we're doing here is we're saying that the Jeff City sport of choice, which is speculation about whether the FBI is going to take action, that needs to not be the sport of choice anymore. What we need to do is we need to pass laws that empower state investigators to take action, empower state law enforcement. First major provision speaks to the practice of money laundering, or the potential for money laundering. Missouri's anything-goes system of campaign finances seems to be built to encourage and not to deter the laundering of political contributions. And so that's why it's entirely bill will prohibit party and independent political action committees from washing money back and forth, and furthermore, will make it a felony to transfer political money solely for the purpose of hiding the original donor. On the subject of disclosure, in order to make it even more difficult to obscure the source of funds and funnel money through political action committees, this bill requires all PACs to file electronically to their Ethics Commission, which will make all contributions in the state searchable online for the first time. Now, while the electronic filing change will make it easier to prove potential corruption in the court of public opinion, it doesn't make it easier to prove corruption in the court of law. And so the next provision addresses that. This bill will change the law by specifically listing a campaign contribution in certain circumstances as a potential pay-for-play situation, as a potential bribe, which even goes beyond what's done in federal law. It makes it very clear that given a direct exchange for legislative action or official action, that would be a felony. Furthermore, on the subject of political money laundering, we say out loud with this bill what is obviously true, and that is that there are some people in this state who can act as treasurers of dozens of political action committees at once, possibly for the purpose of washing political money. These aren't treasurers in such cases. They're bagmen. If they do it for that reason, that's what they are. And our bill would prohibit anyone from acting as a treasurer or a deputy treasurer of multiple political action committees at a time. Also this year, we choose to address the issue of conflicts of interest that can be presented in Jefferson City. Now, on both sides of the aisle, potential conflicts of interest exist, and they can occur when those serving in a political campaign role also serve in the office, in the official office of an elected official in the state. Most of the folks who do this, unfortunately, are not currently required to disclose their political employment. So as a result, there's potential conflicts of interest that the public doesn't know about because it may not be the elected member, it can be their staff. And so we simply say that if you want to work for an elected official and be a political consultant at the same time, it's not too much for us to ask that you publicly disclose your dual roles. This bill makes that change. Now, outside the walls of this building, a bipartisan array of political consultants who do not hold governmental positions are free to contract simultaneously both with elected officials and corporations and other organizations that seek to influence the actions of state government. Yet these consultants are not required to register as lobbyists. With this bill, we close this sort of stealth lobbyist loophole in state law, and we create the category of a de facto lobbyist. And we shed light on these individuals' attempts to influence the course of legislation. Now, the next part I think is pretty important, and it goes into all of these provisions. If we are to pass new ethics laws this year, or if we just seek to make existing ethics laws mean something more, then we need a state felony provision that applies to anyone who tries to obstruct an ethics investigation. Without an obstruction of justice law, we reward politicians who lie to state investigators. This bill includes an obstruction of justice felony modeled upon the federal statute. Finally, this bill is truly comprehensive in that it applies these and many existing laws, ethics laws, not just to state government, but to our counties, our cities, our school boards, and various other municipalities. The proposals put forth by Representative Flook and myself today are among many needed changes, and I'm thankful that several of our colleagues have, both this year and in the past, suggested other ways to stay one step ahead of the small bipartisan minority of individuals who may seek to violate the public trust. What we don't do is stand here today and tell you that these changes are going to fix the problem permanently. Over time, power and influence always finds a way to circumvent the law. So it's our hope, we've discussed this, that several years from now, 2 more legislators will reach across the aisle and seek to close any loopholes that may have developed in the legislation passed in 2010, because this is an ever-evolving process. Finally, the reason for that is because fighting public corruption is like fighting the flu. We come up with a vaccine, and the flu comes back the next year with a new strain. So as the flu adapts, the vaccine must evolve with it. Honest governments, like healthy societies, are the result of eternal vigilance. And so that's what we're working here to do. That's why we're trying to do it in a bipartisan manner, and we'd be happy to